All right, everybody, I think
All
we're
kinds of cool, crazy stuff.
gonna start here. You guys probably already know, this is Dr. Phil Polstra, and the presentation is Big Plane, Little Plane, and how attacks affect them both. And just to give you a little background on Phil, he's currently a professor at Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania. Lately, his research has been the use of microcontrollers and small embedded computers for forensics and penetration testing. He's published multiple books on forensics and testing, and is a recognized expert in many areas, but specifically hardware hacking, forensics, and hacking of networks of low-power devices. He loves to share his knowledge. He's been all over the world, including places like Black Hat and DEF CON, giving presentations. And a fun fact, in his free time, he enjoys spending time with his family, flying and building planes, and jumping out of planes. So without anything further, here's Phil.
Thank you. And by the way, you might not have heard the announcement. Tomorrow we're going to try, if the weather's okay, to jump out of some planes. So if you're interested in that, talk to me or talk to John. Talk to Chad.
What kind of plane do you have?
Oh, I'm not going to be flying it. I'm going to be jumping.
No, he said you were building airplanes.
Oh, I have built airplanes in the past. I don't have them anymore.
An RV?
Not an RV. I built a poor man's RV. A Zenith
Okay.
601. So yeah, you know, why are we having this talk? Part of the reason we're having this talk is, you know, there's a lot of people out there that like to make claims, and you know, this is something that happens and then kind of dies down for a while and then it happens again. So as was mentioned, you know, sometimes people are like, they'll say things like, are you a forensics guy? I'm like, yeah, I do forensics. That's kind of my day job. I teach. And one of only 6 digital forensics programs that has the NSA, Center of Academic Excellence stamp, so that kind of stuff interests you. Come be a student at my university. We don't have a shortage of students. Honestly, we're really working. We have like 300 majors and 5 problems trying to teach 3 students. So we're limited by the bandwidth of what we can do. Is there any way maybe we can get these lights on? You know, it's just like shining right on the screen, and I think there's like a 2 milliwatt bulb in that projector. All the other lights go on. Is that better? A little easier to read.
It is.
All right. So yeah, I've been an aviator for a long time. I have 17 ratings, I think, if I'm counting correctly. All of them are current, commercial pilot, flight instructor of the year for Pennsylvania, just saying. And airplane inspector, airplane mechanic, avionics technician. I've worked on some of the avionics that are pertinent to some of the airliner discussions. A few thousand hours of flight time. Skydiver, skydiving coach. Again, if you want to go skydiving with us tomorrow, let me know. So yeah, I've done a little bit of work in this area. Some of the things we're going to talk about a little bit today. Some common aircraft systems, things like ADS-B, ADS-A, ACARS, things like that. By the way, I apologize that these slides have been mutilated a little bit. I blame Microsoft. And the fact that I was trying to present this on my laptop and there's some technical issues, so this is kind of got morphed a little bit. Also, looks like we have a glorious 4:3 format projection system here, which I don't know where you can buy that. Yeah. Okay. Some common attacks people talk about when it comes to airliners, they talk about things like hacking into the avionics via entertainment networks, hacking into feed, hacking engine systems, hacking into ACARS system. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a messaging system between the aircraft and the ground. Primarily, it's between the aircraft and the airline, but there are some other messages as well that are used, that are sent on the ACARS system. All right, so I want you guys to know, you heard it here first, this is a one-day airline attack. All right, it's not a 0-day because it happened yesterday. So I discovered this attack, and I'm calling this attack a spear smashing attack. So this is my luggage as I collected it at the Moline Airport yesterday morning.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, I didn't have the other picture, but the good side of this hard shell bag was, of course, facing up on the conveyor belt. You know, it comes down the conveyor belt, and I'm like, oh, someone's got a bag that looks like mine. And then I'm like, oh, wait. You know, I put all these stickers on my bag just to identify it easily, right? Because you've all been there. You get the baggage claim, and there's 50 bags that look just like your bag, unless it's some bizarre color. So I'm like, oh, that is my bag. And I picked it up, and at first, it didn't look too bad. And then I turned it around, and I'm like, you know, then I saw this corner here, and it was just a little bit smushed in the corner. And then I turned around and I saw this, and I'm like, wow. And then, you know, here's the other side. Spear smashing. What is that? Does that work for you guys? Is that a good name for this attack? I was targeted. I'm not sure why, but I was targeted by United Airlines.
That was your first mistake. You took United to Moline.
You know,
Did you fly through O'Hare?
I did.
Oh.
They use it as a step. Someone was loading the bags and stepped on yours. Is what it looks like.
I mean,
Honestly,
this thing
you got
looks
dropped,
like
then I
it
got
was
stepped
literally
on.
run over by like a bus. I mean, this is a nice bag, or it was.
Hey, United will give you a nice El Cheapo $50 bag in replacement.
The nice thing about this is that I had a skydiving helmet inside, which was unharmed. So I don't know if it's because it got missed or because it was a nice carbon fiber helmet.
May have helped protect your bag.
Yeah,
I don't know if the helmet's
it's supposed to protect my head. So just real quickly, something I need to get out of the way right away. When it comes to attacking any kind of aircraft, you can't override the pilot. If you're overriding the pilot, then you're probably in the airplane. And all airplanes have unhackable mechanical backup systems, backup instruments. So if you've seen it in Mike Doherty's talks, he's got a talk, I think in the last time slot today in the room across the hall. He flies an airplane, it's got glass cockpit, but it still has backup old school instruments. Now, I won't guarantee you that Mike knows how to use those, but I'll just say they're in there. And that's sometimes a problem where you get people that came up with only the electronic stuff, and then they're like, have to revert to the non-electronic stuff, and they're like, I don't remember how to do this.
Everyone should learn to fly on steam gauges.
Yeah. I had a friend who was an airline pilot, and one time he was telling me this story. He said something failed in his airliner, and he's like, I was able to dial in a VOR and, select a radial to fly. And if you don't know what a VOR is, it's a radio beacon, and basically he selected a course to fly to or from this radio beacon. He was super proud of himself. for being able to do that. I'm like, wow. And how much money do we get paid to fly these airplanes around? So I thought it was kind of funny. But I agree, learning on steam gauges is good. I teach a lot in a flying club in Bloomsburg. Our club just bought a 1960 Cessna. It has nothing but steam gauges. It does not have GPS. It has 2 analog radios. So you have the mechanical tuners, and I'm like, hey, let's go to some busy airspace in this, and let's just see how well my students do. So I love it. It's really nice. We also have a newer Cessna that's got all the fancy electronics. And I'm like, you don't need that. Maybe after you get your license, you'll get checked out. You can possibly affect an autopilot if the pilot notices they're going to disconnect the autopilot. Right? Hopefully they would notice if you did something weird. And you should know that anything you do with an airliner at least is probably going to lead to some sort of alerts going off in the cockpit. Also, the autopilots, by regulation, have to be able to be overridden by a pilot. So if you have a 90-pound supermodel who's also an airline pilot in her spare time, maybe she's not a good model, so she has spare time. She has to be able to do things like if this, stick is coming back, she has to be able to lean all of her 90 pounds on that stick and make it go forward. So there are multiple things that a pilot can do to overcome any potential bad stuff. Now, we're going to talk a little bit, just kind of high-level stuff about some of the airliners and some of the things that they have. The older airliners use something called ARINC 429, and this is a network standard that interconnects avionics systems. ARINC 429 requires specialized hardware. And because of that, they're like, hey, the whole world uses Ethernet. And Ethernet chips are cheap, Ethernet connectors are cheap, it's well understood technology. So let's start using that. So we're not paying as much for all of this specialized equipment. And they use a modified version of Ethernet known as ARINC 664 or AFTS, depending on what airplane it's in. So what is this like? It's built on Ethernet, but it's not your father's Ethernet, right? You can't just start sending packets. It's never wireless. That's the other thing. Even if you have a big honking Boeing, and it's got a massive wingspan, you're like, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to run a wire all the way out to that wing? You're gonna run a wire to that wing. You're not gonna rely on wireless anything in that aircraft, right? There is some security in place. This stuff is not connected. Things like entertainment systems, it's not connected to in-flight Wi-Fi. So it's Ethernet, but that doesn't automatically mean, oh, I can just do stuff with it. So again, it's based on ARINC 629. It was first created by Boeing for the 777. It allows the use of COTS, common off-the-shelf components, and it's not proprietary. Some of the differences: uses redundant channels. You're not going to find something important in aviation that has like one channel or one wire. Okay. That one wire breaks, things are not good. Right? But we don't like that. So what it does is it also assigns time slices to avoid collisions and to make things deterministic. Right? TCP/IP, beautiful technology. Everybody uses it. Right? But here's the problem with TCP/IP. I send a packet. If it's UDP, I don't even know if that packet arrived, right? I just, hopefully you got it. If you didn't get it, maybe you'll ask. Well, even with IP, the issue is, how long does it take for that packet to go from here to here? Don't know. Why don't I know? Biggest reason I don't know is collisions. Right? Oh, two people try to talk at once. By the way, how many of you in here are pilots? How many want to be pilots? Come to Pennsylvania for a couple weeks, we'll be here.
I can't get into a 171 with an instructor and be above 0 gallons of fuel, so it's expensive for me to get my license.
That can be an issue. I actually just did someone's license in 20 days. Sure, her story is she's a NASA engineer and she's between assignments, so to speak, where she's being assigned to Russia, waiting for paperwork. And she's like, I'm home with my folks for a couple of weeks. I always want to get my license. Can you help me out here? So I flew with her a lot. And then I went through withdrawal when we stopped flying a couple weeks ago. I'm not flying at least, 4 hours today. It's horrible. So yeah, it's collision. So like the reason I asked about the pilot thing is when you talk on the radio, only one person can talk on the radio at once. So as pilots, like if you're going into an uncontrolled field, you'll say the name of the field, you'll say what you're going to say, then you say the name of the field at the end. Part of the reason that you do that is so that if you get blocked by somebody, they'll at least, they'll hear runway 27, and then they'll hear Bloomsburg at the end. They're like, oh, well that's in Bloomsburg, but I'm not in Bloomsburg. Right? Otherwise, they get a little worried. They're on final for runway 27 at their airport, and they hear somebody talking about being on final for 27, and they're like looking around going, hopefully that's not here. Right? So the same thing is true with our IP transmissions. So what they do is they time slice it, and everyone gets their time slice. And they use virtual links. So virtual link is basically a unidirectional pipe. You have one and only one sender and one or more receivers. And we use time slicing, we use something called a bandwidth allocation gap that determines the size of the time slice. How big are the packets you need to send on this network? If they're bigger, your time slice is bigger. Okay? Well, what happens when the time slice is bigger? You have to wait longer, right? Because there's more than one sender on this network. And you have jitter. Right? We talk about jitter. It's like the maximum latency minus the minimum latency. And it's determined by the number of virtual links and by the bandwidth allocation gap or bag. So hopefully you can kind of see this. So it's a redundant system. You have an A network and a B network. And then you have your MAC layer stuff, integrity checking, redundancy management. And basically here in this system, whoever gets their packet there first wins. Okay. So it's a redundant system. And here's what I mean when I said, okay, you can generate alerts if you start mucking about with this. And you're like, oh, I'm just going to connect to one of these networks and send some bogus packets. Well, guess what? Pretty quickly, you're going to get alerts in the cockpit going, there's a broken wire. You need to send this sucker for maintenance, right? Because if one wire is broke, maybe the other wire is going to break pretty soon, right? With very close proximity to each other. Right? And again, another picture, AFDX connections. You have the two channels, and it's connected. Now, here's the other thing. There is no equivalent to a crossover cable in these suckers. You must go through an avionics switch. and I've actually worked on these avionics switches. Right? And the avionics switch is a switch. It's not a hub, right? You guys know the difference between a hub and a switch? A hub, anything comes in, it just stupidly goes blast, blast, blast to every port. And a switch says, oh, this is your packet. I'll send it to you. Right? Every connection on that switch is programmed. So if I try to send bogus messages on port 2 into that switch and say, I am this sensor that's connected to port 5, that switch is going to say, bullshit, and it's not going to forward my packets. Because port 5 or port 2 is not allowed to send packets to this other port.
Is that as simple as just setting the address for the device on the thing?
It's like every virtual link is programmed.
It's pretty complicated, depending on the version of AFDX you're working to, because
Right.
you can't just plug something in and it'll discover that power, an aircraft power on. These have to be specifically, they're specifically hard-coded into the firmware when the
There's
switch
not like
is loaded.
DHCP or
No.
something equivalent to that.
Yeah, I expected that.
Yeah, so every single link is programmed. So, that's barrier number one. So people are like, oh, I can just connect my laptop and my Ethernet to this, and I'll send bogus messages through the in-flight Wi-Fi and all this other, we'll talk about that in a little bit. By the way, in case you're wondering, I'll give you a little preview. That's sort of bullshit. You can't do that, but we'll talk about why you can't do that. Another just sub part of the diagram for an airliner, I won't say which one. You have things like the joystick that's used to fly the plane. You have a primary flight display and a multifunction display. Primary flight display is like the big screen that shows you which way's up and how fast you're going and if you're banking and things like that. Often it'll show like synthetic vision, we call it. It'll show you what the ground looks like. And multifunction display is multifunction. It can display engine diagnostics, it can display a whole bunch of stuff. Your routing, things like that. And a lot of these things tie into a flight management system computer. And you'll notice that a lot of these links are one-way. Some of them are in yellow, which are two-way. Really, it's two links. But, for the schematic, it's just easier to draw it as one bi-directional. The range of this remote is like 2 feet. I can practically just walk over it. Right? Another schematic. Okay, let's talk a little bit about entertainment systems. So some people out there have been like, hey, I can use the entertainment system at my seat, and I'm going to connect all the way into that avionics bus, and I'm going to wreak havoc, and I'm going to take over this plane using either my laptop or my smartphone, right? And here's at a basic level why this doesn't work. And why do I have a picture of a VGA port? It's essentially similar to trying to hack a computer through the VGA port. I'm not saying you couldn't cause bad things if you send some, spikes down those lines. But here's what I'm saying. If I have a computer that has a VGA port, which obviously my laptop doesn't, that's why I'm using this lovely Windows machine over here. So does that port expect to receive a whole bunch of signals back to the monitor? Not so much. So you can send signals on a line all day long that's an output line. Nobody's listening. Are you going to affect much? No. And that's part of what's happening with people who say, I'm going to use an entertainment system to do this. Right? First off, the entertainment systems are connected through something called a NED, a network extension device. And this NED is used as a gateway. So a gateway connects different kinds of networks together. Right? Now remember that avionics networks, never wireless. It's not compatible with TCP/IP. So you got TCP/IP out in the seats. You have not TCP/IP in the avionics network. So you'll have this NED, another schematic. I think that's a NED unit in the corner. Let's see. The picture's kind of small. Anyway, one of the reasons that there are a few people out there that are a little bit confused about this is that Boeing asked for special permission in order to connect the passenger information network to other networks. Basically, they said, hey, it'd be nice if people sitting in the back could see a little screen that says, here's your flight today. Here's where you are. Here's how fast you're going. Here's your altitude. Here's where we're going. Here's when we'll get there. Right? So you need some information from up front. And they're like, okay, can we do this? And FAA said, yes, provided you use a net. And some certain other conditions were met. Do you think those conditions were met? Yes. Otherwise, they wouldn't certify the plane. Right? So, FAA said they have to, insurers, different stuff, and highlighted isolation from, or airplane electronic system security protection against, all these things. Right? Which they did. I'm serious, it's like 2 feet. All right. So, what's a NED? We talked about that a little bit. You have to go through this gateway. Every connection has to be programmed. The FMS, Flight Management System, does not expect to receive any input whatsoever from this NED. So even if you compromise the NED, and then they're trying to send your bogus signals into the avionics network, it's going to ignore you. It's going to say, I'm sorry, but you are on the wrong port, so screw you. Here's something I shamelessly stole from a manufacturer's site. Oh, here you go. Here's one of the many possible NEDs. All right, a few years back, I guess about 5 years ago now, there's a plane that disappeared. You guys probably heard about this. Malaysian airline 370. A Boeing 777 uses ARINC 629, which is even less like Ethernet than the stuff we're talking about now. Right? This is like the older standard. And what happened right after that? A bunch of people came out and they're like, hey, it was cyber hijacked. Right? Invented a new word. Cyber hijack. So a lot of these people who are making these claims, well, first of all, it's like the thing just disappeared. And then everyone extrapolates. So, I get this quite often. There'll be an accident, and the next day, people will ask me, so Phil, what do you think happened there? I'm like, I wasn't there. I have zero data. It's just wild speculation for me to say anything. But apparently some people don't have a problem with that. They're just like, man, I'll speculate all day long. And some people have like zero background in aviation. It's like never a pilot, never worked for an avionics company, just hacked maybe a freeware PC sim one day and extrapolated all the way to 777. I won't mention any names, but there are people out there that have done this. Okay. There's some stuff I wanted to include, but I can't tell you everything because, well, I signed a lot of NDAs in my life. Okay, so now, because we're getting Microsoft here, I'm going to have to switch. I'm going to try to show you a couple little fun videos. By the way, these are intended to be somewhat humorous. So here is the 101, how to
Hello,
hook
and welcome to How to Hack Into and Take Control of a Commercial Airplane. Step 1. When trying to get access to the plane's navigation system, try to utilize the plane's in-flight entertainment system. This is near to impossible, but with enough typing and hacker buzzwords, such as
I'm in.
and,
Rerouted the network interface.
also,
I've gotten the router girder.
yeah! You can make it seem like the in-flight entertainment and navigation systems are connected, and thus frighten an air marshal enough to incapacitate you. With enough hacking, one could be able to sign on to the plane's Wi-Fi for free.
Okay, by the way, credit for these videos. These videos were made up the road at University of New York.
Force the plane to go up to another location, or at least harass the flight crew.
And I did ask one of my former colleagues up there if she was able to come down today and kind of co-present with me, but she was unfortunately not available. So she's responsible for all these fun videos. Okay, what about GA planes, general aviation planes? Pretty much taught about these. There are some GA planes out there that have in-flight Wi-Fi. It's not super common. Primarily it's something you're going to find in biz jets. If you're flying around a little Cessna and you want internet access, you're probably going to use stuff from your phone or a hotspot that's based off of those systems. Now, these systems, and the few planes that have them, namely BizJet, may actually be connected to the avionics networks. And there are some potential vulnerabilities there. However, it's not terribly smart to hack at a plane that you would have to be on at the time. Right? So, yeah, for these small guys, there's potential vulnerability there. But let's be honest, there are easier ways to attack. You're on the plane. Why do you have to, hack the Wi-Fi and connect to avionics? It's like you're physically there, and if you're on the plane, obviously you don't value your life very much. So, easier things to do.
I think we need to establish that there are several generations of IFE, in-flight entertainment systems out there. You've got some old stuff that have a lot of direct connectivity, but a lot of the new stuff is just like AFDX networks and
Right.
629. It's all completely segmented down hardwired unidirectional pipes because it has to pass FAA inspection.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and again, a lot of what I'm going to talk about here today, you can totally mess with the general aviation guys all day long. But when it comes to the big boys, it's a little bit harder. I guess I got to get moving here because I only got another 10 minutes. ADSB attacks are something people like to talk about a lot. ADSB stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. It was a system first pioneered in Alaska for something called free flight. Alaska has more airplanes than cars. They have poor radar coverage because Alaska, if you didn't know this, is huge. A lot of people think, oh no, it looks pretty small up there next to Canada. No, Alaska is very large. So the idea is planes talk to each other. If there's a conflict, they work it out. That's the whole idea of free flight. So that's ADSB. There's ADS-A, which is the addressable version, which is what the airliners use. And what's the difference? Here's a good analogy. Cable TV. I have a cable-ready television. I can hook it up to the cable. I need a cable box to buy movies and stuff because I need it to be addressable. I need to be able to say, hey, you specific box. Here's your route, right? So with the little guys, they have something called TISB. TISB is traffic information that will be displayed in the cockpit. It uses ADS-B, which is sent to air traffic control, and then air traffic control forwards that to receivers in your cockpit, right? The big boys have something called TCAD, which is a collision avoidance system. Does not use ADS-B ever, right? Well, I shouldn't say it that way. Okay. A modern TCAS system, I'm sorry, TCAD is what's in the spec. TCAS is the real deal. The modern TCAS system, there is an allowance for far away displays of aircraft based on ADS-B. However, you will never ever get an alert telling you to climb, descend, turn, whatever, based on that. It will always be based on transponder signals. So transponder is just something that sits there waiting for it to get hit by radar. And it goes, I'm over here, and it sends some information. Right? That is the only thing that they use in a TCAS system. They use directional antennas. They figure out, here's where you are. They don't believe your bullshit if you send an ADS-B signal saying, I'm right off your right wing. They're like, no, you're not. I just pinged your transponder, nobody answered. So you're lying. Or your GPS is off or something. So transponders, just talk about what those are. Real quick, ADS-B attack. So what is that?
Trying to reroute to another location, or at least harass the flight crew, simply have your pilot friends fly multiple planes in front, behind, and around the plane you would like. Have said plane send thief transponder signals to the hijacked plane and force it to react to resolution advisories. The crew may possibly reroute to another location.
Seems like a lot of work. Why don't we just borrow that one?
In actuality, here's what would happen.
ADS-B attack?
We're glad that nobody can hide in the airplane. That'd be embarrassing.
Alright, so basically what would happen if you did an ADS-B attack against an airliner, essentially nothing is going to happen. Now, once again, you talk about general aviation, there are some cheap ADS-B receivers out there. Right? In fact, some of these suckers are less than $200. There's something called a Strat-Tux. It's trying to be like a Strat-Tus, which is an expensive unit. Strat-Tux is made with a Raspberry Pi and a couple of boards. ADS-B receiver, it even has something called ARs, which shows you, which way's up, things like that. Guess what? Those suckers, you send those signals in there, it would be like, let me display that for you, pilot. So you can totally mess with the GA pilot, especially if he's got the cheap equipment. Sometimes, some people have talked about attacking engine system. Basically, I'll just say real quickly because of time, it's like the VGA port thing again. You're trying to use a monitor to attack. It's just a monitor. Remember those LifeLock commercials? I think they are. But you're being robbed. I'm just a monitor, like at the bank. You guys know what I'm talking about? You're all looking at me like, what the hell is he on about? Similar situation. Then there's ACARS. ACARS is used for air-to-ground communications, for things like weather, delays, manifest, even maintenance. Some of you might have heard, hey, after this plane disappeared, there were some signals received. Did anyone hear about that? The Malaysian airliner?
All the ACARS is automated.
Yes. So the engines can send ACARS messages to the manufacturer and to the airline for maintenance purposes, right? So there's a lot of research that goes into all of these components in these modern airliners. So they're sending messages all the time. And that's why it's like, okay, so the fact that you receive some of these messages after, you know, something disappeared off the radar or whatever, is not all that unusual, honestly. How could you attack ACARS? You could send a fake message, and I'll just close with this one real quick. And by the way, ACARS isn't something that we have in GA anyway, so it's not like.
On the ground, one may be able to take control of the flight's ACARS message, where a crew receives flight plan modifications and ATC clearances.
We got an ACARS message. Emergency. Reroute plane to Cuba or Bombardment.
Make sure to send the orders to a pilot who doesn't verify the change in flight plan.
I don't know about that. We better verify that with company. Hey, company, this is 2734. Can you just confirm, we just got an ACARS message saying we need to reroute to Cuba?
No, that is correct. Please stay on board.
All right, roger that. We'll just continue on with the flight.
In conclusion, hijacking an airplane is very serious and highly illegal, and requires a specific set of circumstances that are very.
All right, so that's all I have the time for, unfortunately. You know, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to, you know, find me later. You know,
Are you sharing your slide deck?
I will not be sharing the slide deck, in part because it has like embedded videos which didn't play on this and all that. But, so unfortunately, no.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.